men who are loyal and committed to family relationships and friendships, men who are trustworthy, men who are determined to keep their business going and provide opportunity and employment for others, men who are making a difference without recognition, men who hugged their children this morning or fed the cat or made a special trip to buy milk for the baby, men who are courteous and safe drivers, men who mentor boys and young men who read to their children, men who take their babies for a walk, men who are building a business and a dream. We want to acknowledge these men and to the guy that that goes to work every day. We want to acknowledge you. And those who are in support of the positive aspects of masculinity need to acknowledge these men for doing what they are committed to do, and they consider it their obligation and their choice and their duty, and they do it joyously with great love. The thing that so often is at the heart of what we're doing here on the real side is reflected in the following. Conversation and raising consciousness. Not just any talk is a conversation. Not any talk raises consciousness. Good conversation has an edge. It opens your eyes to do something, quickens your ears, and good conversation reverberates. It keeps on talking in your mind later in the day. The next day you find yourself still conversing with what was said. That reverberation afterward is the very raising of consciousness. Your mind's been moved. You are at level with your reflections. James Hillman. From the book, we've had 100 years of psychology and the world's going to the pit. What I want to share with you today may be a bit upsetting and a bit disturbing, but be that as it may, we need to begin to look at the pain of masculinity. We need to start looking at male abuse, because it's connected to why men can't feel, why men can't be emotionally available, and why when you're talking to a man and you ask him how he feels and you ask him what's going on with him, he has this blank look on his face, and it's not that he doesn't want to tell you, he really doesn't know because he hasn't looked inside. And when he looks inside, there's nothing but a black hole. So he can't tell you something that he doesn't know. And people view that as something that men do deliberately, that they don't want to communicate. And one of the things that I want us to come to terms with is the first abuse, the first wound of a male child. And I'm going to share a recording of a conversation on the first wounding that male children receive. I got in touch when I was writing the book with an experience that I had when I was 6 days old that was recounted years later as the time when they were having the circumcision ceremony, and my dad held me down while in my case, the Jewish mohel did the ceremony, cut my penis, and I screamed bloody murder, as my mother recounts it. Let out a stream of urine that went up over my head and hit my dad in the eye, which he recounted for years. And when I was writing the book, I started to remember feelings about my body. I started asking, well, how come I don't like my body? And I began to wonder if there was any connection between my sense of body integrity and the experience of having my penis cut when I was a baby. And I thought, well, it seems to me there's got to be some connection. I wonder, what the men's movement is saying about this. So I got out all my books, all the latest things in the men's movement, and I figured, because I was too dense to have recognized this, I figured I just had missed it. And I had 58 books at that time, men's movement books. Out of the 58, only 8 mentioned circumcision at all. 5 of the 8 mentioned it so scripturally, I couldn't even find the reference when I found the page. It was just like a word or two. And only 3 mentioned circumcision at all to any degree. And none of them to the degree that I thought it should be talked about. So I started looking for some books.
I found one book in the library written by a woman, got it home, and I started, how you do, as I mentioned before, when you're getting some truth, it sticks to you, and I just took it and I opened it at random just to get into it, and this is what I read. The following is an account of a student nurse named Marilyn Milo. Student nurse at the time, she's a nurse now. She says, we students filed into the newborn nursery to find a baby strapped spread eagle to a plastic board on a countertop across the room. He was struggling against his restraint, tugging, whimpering, and then crying helplessly. No one was tending the infant, but when I asked my instructor if I could comfort him, he said, wait till the doctor gets here. I wondered how a teacher of the healing arts could watch someone suffer and not offer assistance. I wondered about the doctor's power, which could intimidate others from following protective instincts. When he did arrive, I immediately asked the doctor if I could help the baby. He told me to put my finger into the baby's mouth. I did, and the baby sucked. I stroked his little head and spoke quietly and softly to him. He began to relax and was momentarily quiet. The silence was soon broken by a piercing scream, the baby's reaction to having his foreskin pinched and crushed as the doctor attached the clamp to his penis. The shriek intensified when the doctor inserted an instrument between the foreskin and the glands, tearing the two structures apart. Glands from urine and feces. The baby started shaking his head back and forth, the only part of his body free to move, as the doctor used another clamp to crush the foreskin lengthwise, where he then cut. This made the opening of the foreskin large enough to insert a circumcision instrument, the device used to protect the glands from being severed during the surgery. The baby began to gasp and choke, breathless from his still continuous screams. How could anyone say circumcision is painless when the suffering is so obvious? My bottom lip began to quiver. Tears filled my eyes and spilled over. I found my own sobs difficult to contain. How much longer could this go on? During the next stage of the surgery, the doctor crushed the foreskin against the circumcision instrument and then finally amputated it. The baby was limp, exhausted, spent. I had not been prepared. Nothing could have prepared me for this experience. To see a part of this baby's penis being cut off without an anesthetic was devastating. But even more shocking was the doctor's comment, very audible, several octaves below the piercing scream. There's no medical reason for doing it. I couldn't believe my ears. My knees became weak and I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe that the medical profession, dedicated to helping and healing, could inflict such unnecessary pain and anguish on innocent babies.
Well, that's the first wound to a male child. An unnecessary assault on his person. And just think of the terror and how that is encoded. And what's the purpose of it? There's no medical reason for it. Well, maybe it has to do with the fact that if you're going to train boys to be insensitive, to train boys to be brutes, to train boys to willingly volunteer to go to war, to do the kinds of things that our society has been structured to do to the working class male, then maybe it does help to begin the process of disassociation from your physical person, because the only reason why anybody would volunteer to go to war is that somehow you're not connected with the fact that you can get the crap blown out of you. But there are other things that are more important to you. There are other things that appear to be offered to you that are more important. That tape came from the first men conference in Austin, Texas, and the speaker was Jed Diamond. And my own personal experience having two boys, and on both occasions, not only having two boys, but I have a grandson. And my own personal experience was, with my own children, I asked my wife, I begged my wife, not to have my first son circumcised. And because of whatever, clearly a man doesn't have any control or say-so over this. It's amazing when you really think about it. And maybe it's a power play. Maybe It's a reaction to the suffering that a woman has just gone through to have a child, and she blames the father, or she blames the penis, she blames masculinity for the suffering that she just endured.